What's up, everybody? Today we're talking about review, and we're going to talk about different tips, how to organize for review, set yourself up, and how to make sure review is going to go fast and smooth. But I know what you guys thinking. Nikolai, you don't have any review experience. You are not qualified to talk about this topic, and you would absolutely be right. Because today we have Safina joining us all the way from Canada, who has experience not just doing review, but also managing reviews. Safina, welcome. How's the weather in Canada?
It's cold.
It's cold. Well, that would be expected.
Yeah.
So we have three categories we want to tackle today. We're going to talk about setting up review protocol, selecting reviewers, and training. That's going to be part one of our video, and in part two, we're going to talk more in general how to speed up the actual review process. But this is one of two videos we're going to film for you. So let's start with review protocol. So one of the things that Safina was explaining to me before the call is setting up quality review protocol before the review starts is extremely important, and generally people do that. However, there are a few things that they miss. So Safina, what are some things that tend to be missing from a review protocol or could be done better?
So one thing that's really important that I found that a lot of people are missing from review protocols is information about the industry itself. So pretend you are reviewing the cat food industry or the pet food industry. Now, most of us reviewers don't have the experience or don't have the knowledge or the background in pet food making, creating, what ingredients go in. So when there is a lawsuit or there is something that there's a conflict in this pet food industry, just telling us to code particular issues is insufficient, I feel. And I think what would be helpful is providing a background about what goes into pet food making, what it is, how it's made, who does it, how the ingredients are sourced. Another thing would be the terminology used in this pet food industry. Oftentimes, review protocols, they give a basic summary, but they don't provide definitions of these concepts or ideas. Every industry has specific terminology within that industry that's to be used. But we're not familiar with it because I've never made pet food. I don't even have a pet, so I have no idea.
Got it. So explanation, if you're doing issue coding, you want a good explanation of what those issues are, and you want to have a glossary of different terms that are industry specific, like a construction industry or pet food industry and so on.
Or forestry management industry or hot air balloon industry, everything. So I don't know anything about those specific topics.
Right. So it's unfair to assume that reviewers are going to know about that specific industry. They need to be educated not about the legal side of things, but about the industry itself. And
Yes.
the other thing you were telling me is it's important to have clients available to answer questions if there is a new term that comes up or something that reviewers haven't seen. You need to get a quick answer from a client or from somebody. What does that mean? How should I be coding this? Is that right?
That's exactly right. And in fact, right now I just looked up forestry management. Now, I don't know anything about forestry management, but a term that came up was ever-age timber management.
I don't know what that is.
I couldn't tell you if my life depended on it, but if someone explained the concept, told me what that was, explained why that was important, if it even is, I don't know, it came up on Wiki, I would have a better understanding. A lot of, and this is important because sure, I can look it up on Wiki right now, but oftentimes when reviewers are coding or are in the process of reviewing documents, they don't necessarily have access to the internet. That's not always something that's been made available.
Right, right. I'm aware of that. The internet on the reviewer computers is usually locked down.
So
Um,
I can't look it up, even if I had wanted to. And even if I were to look it up, it may not be the correct definition. It's better if this glossary is provided to us so we understand the industry better. This not only makes the reviewing process easier, but also more effective and efficient.
and the last thing in the review protocol you were mentioning to me, having sample documents. How is that helpful?
That is so helpful. I couldn't tell you how helpful that would be. Um, because when you tell me to code, say I'm going to use this forestry management, and you tell me to code particular issues relevant to forestry management, and you give me an example, give me an explanation of what it is, or just a brief explanation, or just something. But if I don't have a document that correlates to that explanation, when I see it, I might not know that this document is pertinent to this issue. I might think it to be something else. I might not pick up on it because the evergreen management or whatever I said isn't something that's familiar to me. So if it were mentioned not directly on the page, but the document itself did discuss this issue, I wouldn't have coded it as such because all I'd be looking for is that specific term.
All right, so those are the important parts for the review protocol. Make sure that we have good issue code and explanation, glossary of terms, client available to answer questions, and having sample documents available. So
Yes.
let's move on to next part, which is selecting reviewers for projects. That is something that you have explained to me that is a little bit. It could use some improvement, let's say, is when their people are just taking, just as many bodies as you can, get them into the room and just get them to review. It doesn't matter what their sort of skill level is, doesn't matter how good they're doing, just get them in there and get it done. But the good part you were mentioning, you notice that there is a change, like the clients are being more selective as to reviewers they pick for a review, right? They're looking to get more experienced people, not just getting bodies in. The reason why sometimes people just come in and being thrown into the mix and not being pulled out, even though if they're not doing good, is because companies don't want to redo the training, right? So if you had, let's say, a team of 15 people and 5 people are not doing good, well, if you remove those 5 people and bring 5 new, you have to do training all the way from beginning for those 5 people, and you sort of delaying the project.
That's exactly correct.
Right. So it's sort of a balancing act. Do you go with sort of okay performing reviewers, or do you try to replace them with the better ones, but at the same time you have to spend more time on training them?
So that's where it's really important that initially, even if there are a whole warm body of people coming into the review, let's say you bring in 50 people just because you need 50 people. So you just select randomly and just bring in these people. Okay, so let's say you do that because that is the industry standard or has been. Then at least when you have these 50 people, train them properly on both the software and on the review protocol. Because not all reviewers have knowledge of the software they're using.
Got it. And we'll talk about training in the next section.
Right.
But I just want to touch base on one more thing in selecting your reviewers. So when you do select reviewers, you need to monitor their performance, right? See how good they're doing, and uh, either replace some poor performing people or provide additional training to them.
And that's so important because, say, if I were to be doing review and I were to be doing review for 10 hours a day or 5 hours a day or whatever have you. Now, if I'm coding issues and I'm coding them slowly or I'm coding them incorrectly, especially if I don't have familiarity with, let's say, the stationery section of Staples or of office supplies. Now, when I'm asked to code these issues. I'm just coding them based on my very, very limited knowledge. And I might be coding them slowly, I might be coding them quickly, I might be coding them correctly or incorrectly. But if no one tells me how I'm doing, how the heck am I supposed to know? And I need someone to tell me, Safina, this is how you're performing, this is what you're doing, this is how you can improve. At least give me some baseline so I know how I compare to my fellow reviewers.
Got it. And that takes us right into the training section that we wanted to cover next. And the overall idea here is, well, do not overlook the training. And there are two sides to training. There is a software that reviewers are using, and there is a review protocol training. So there are two distinct things. And you were telling me earlier how you had issues using the software because no one actually explained to you how to use it in the most efficient way. Is that right?
That's completely correct. When I first started reviewing, maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I had no idea how to use software. So I remember that I was coding documents ineffectively, inefficiently. And to be honest, if I look back, I would have fired myself because I wasn't performing adequately. And I don't think that when I was doing the review, I was making good use of time. I wasn't using, say, save and next, for instance. I was just saving documents, going back to the full document review list. I was looking up who I was and trying to find that. I mean, no, you cannot do that. And I'm so embarrassed that I did, but I just had started. But if I had been taught, hey, Safina, this is how you review documents. This is what you choose to go to the next document. This is how you do it. And I will give in an example or at least a mini training video if someone was not there. But so that I could learn how to do this. It's like being asked to use Excel, but you've never used a Microsoft Office product. How can you do it, right?
Yep. Exactly. And so the next thing we talked about is training in the review protocol. So in the beginning of a video, we talked about how important it is to set it up, but it's also important to make sure everyone understands it and possibly even remind people of certain things that they may forget. I know this happens to me in the technical field where we do something very rarely and people tend to forget. So me as a manager, I have to go, whoa, remember that time we did this? Don't forget that we have to follow this process. So, and I'm sure similar applies in the review protocol training. Now, moving on to the next item is making sure entire team is on the same page, right? Everyone is coding consistently. So what do you do to make sure that happens?
So one of the things that can be done is having a question log. And this also goes back to having the clients answer questions rapidly. So if you have a question log where questions come up that all the 50 reviewers have access to, can ask questions that are written down, and the documents to which the question pertains is made available to all of the 50 reviewers, not just that specific reviewer who asked the question, but to all reviewers. Because if John has a question about a document, I likely have a similar question about the document. It might not be a document that I've seen, but that question that John has and asks would be valuable to me going forward. If I can see the question that John asked and I can see the document which pertains to that question, and I've been given that access and I have the answer quickly, then when I go on to do my own review, I can apply the same logic or knowledge from his question to my questions.
Got it.
And this way, we're all on the same page. We all have the same access to this knowledge and this information.
Right. So as team works together, they sort of accumulate this knowledge. They build up this question log, and people can go in, search, look it up, and find out if something that is questionable to them.
Right.
The next item is sending samples of coding to the client. And this is what you talked about. So after you code certain number of documents, you want to share them with clients to make sure that you are doing the right thing, right? You're coding it the right way, and the coding matches their expectations. Go
So
ahead.
it's important that you do send a sample and that the client responds quickly. I can't emphasize this enough. That, if we're looking at, say we send a sample of 100 documents because there are 10 issues and we send 10 documents per issue. You need to know that those documents have been coded correctly, and you don't want to continue with doing the review without having the answer to the client telling you, yes, you're doing it correctly, no, you're doing it incorrectly, yes, we found these errors, yes, we're very happy with this. So that when you progress in the reviews some reviews go on 6 months, some go on 3 weeks, some go on 3 years. You're not continually coding incorrectly. So if you give the clients a sample, they give you feedback. This is best practice.
Got it. And the last point we talked about is, again, feedback to reviewers, right? This is something you started talking about earlier. And you should, after you train the reviewers, you have them work for a while. You want to give them feedback on their quality, on their speed. Maybe there is an overturn rate. I mean, I'm guessing everyone wants to know how they're doing, right?
Right. And it's important. So this goes back to, sending the sample documents and giving reviewers feedback. I think what would be very helpful to reviewers and would be efficient to clients in the long run is before you actually start the real review, you do a test review, a week in advance. Yes, maybe it costs money, maybe it's expensive, maybe it's whatever, but the return on investment for doing that, if you get it all fixed in that first week of, you're not coding real documents, you're coding real documents, but that review is not exactly counted as to, the output, you get a better idea of what's going on with the reviewers. The reviewers have feedback. The reviewers now have more knowledge about the industry because they've looked at the documents, they put their eyes on the documents, they've seen what issues may come up, what issues don't come up, and they've asked some questions. So that's important.
Got it. All right. Thank you very much. I think these are all the topics we had for starting review, right? We talked
Yes.
about review protocol, selecting reviewers, and training reviewers. In part 2, we are going to talk about the actual review itself, how to speed it up, what things are important to reviewers, and just some of the technical considerations to accommodate the actual review process. Right, Safina, thank you very much.
Thank
Guys,
you for having me.
we will be back in part 2, and we'll talk about review improvements in general. Talk to you guys later.
Awesome.